How's everybody doing today? Today is my first ever 31 on 31. Well, 32, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, welcome into the show. Did y'all hear that? It's fine. I'm okay. I'm I'm okay. Anyway, welcome in guys. Today I'm going to be ranking 32 movies because when my friends and I made this list, we weren't thinking about Terrifier 3. So we added Terrifier 3 onto the list. Anyway, what the list is modern horror icons. So movies that we think contain modern horror icons. So basically anything like post 2000. Because if you're looking at the old school icons, you know, most of those guys are from or up through the 90s if you include like Ghostface. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 32 is Hatchet 3. So I did rewatch every single film for this ranking. The Hatchet franchise, my very first time watching it was either last year or the year before. I believe it was the year before. My first watch through, I just binged all 4 movies and absolutely had a blast with it. The second watch through of the Hatchet franchise is kind of tough. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of tough. When you know what's going to happen, it is a little bit boring because the story is it's really not great. They're just really fun gore slashers with pretty good practical effects. So with Hatchet 3 on the second watch through, I just really got bored with it. I did not enjoy this movie the second watch through. It was my least favorite the first watch through, and it is my least favorite of all of these movies for the second watch through. Coming in at number 31 is Saw 5. Coming up through Saw 4, and you get this ending that initiates that there's a new villain. But we haven't seen enough of the new villain to fully know how we feel about them yet, right? All we know is in 4, they establish this villain. Let's see who they are, what they're about. In 5, man, 5 does a poor job at portraying, at giving us something to latch onto. And on the other part of that is they give us too much of it in 5. We get too much of him and what he's doing and everything that's going on outside of the traps and very little of what's going on inside the traps. This is my least favorite Saw film. Coming in at number 30 is Saw 3. And I know that's going to confuse a lot of people, but for me, and it's not because of the traps or any of that, it is because I find this movie to be so boring. That's it. It was boring to me. The character that you're following isn't interesting. The story to go with it isn't interesting. What Jigsaw and his cronies are doing isn't interesting. And I don't know. I just couldn't get into this one. It's not bad. It was boring for me. Coming in at number 29 is Hatchet 2. And again, it's just boring. I do like the gore, but the story is just boring. Coming in at number 28 is Victor Crowley. This is where they stop being quite as boring. It's over the top and it's wacky with this movie being stuck in the plane. And I wish the second watch through these movies was as enthralling as the first watch through, but it just really isn't. I may have to go back and redo my Hatchet ranking video They're pretty much in the same exact order, but what I was saying about the movies, I think if you're new to the more indie slasher films, I think the Hatchet films are some of the better ones. Once you've watched over 100 films in a year, and then you have to put these on and rewatch all of these to do for content, it's really, really difficult to stay engaged. Coming in at number 27 is Saw 2. This is one of the Saw movies that I've actually seen the most. What this movie seems to struggle with for me is once you've seen everything start to ramp up in the Saw franchise, and you get these bigger and bigger, more elaborate traps, more interesting things going on. And then you go back to a film that you've seen a ton of times because it's one of the few Saw movies that you actually, like me, watched over and over and over again when I was younger. It just becomes not as good as what you once thought it was. And it suffers from just that older feel to it. I do like some of the traps. The only one that really always sticks out to me because it would freak me the hell out is, of course, the syringes. Coming in at number 26 is Saw 6. And this movie, I really kind of enjoy, even though I don't like the new villain. What I do like about this movie is the setting of the trap. And this gentleman that Jigsaw wanted to get back at, him having to make choices because of what his job entailed, and how insurance companies make choices on who lives and who dies, and he had to do that the entire time. And then you have the big twist at the end, dealing with that character and other people that were encaged as well. All of that was fantastic. In fact, if you didn't have the outside storyline outside of the trap, this would rank way higher for me. Coming in at number 25 is Hatchet. What does it for me for this movie is not the story or the setting or any of that. It's the actors in this film. The original Hatchet has such a great cast. After seeing Joel David Moore in Grandma's Boy back in the day, anytime that I see him, it's it's just a good time for me because it just brings up memories from that movie. So this movie kind of gets an edge for that, but it's still a fun movie that gets you into the franchise. Just has a charm to it that's really great. But again, rewatching all four of these movies for this was a slog. Even this one was difficult for me to engage with for a second watch. Coming in at number 24 is Terrifier. The practical effects are great. Seeing Art the Clown be Art the Clown is great. But this movie, it's just, there's nothing to latch on to. There's literally the only reason to watch this is just for Art the Clown. There's no story, really. I mean, there's a little bit of a story, but there's really no story going on. It's just a slaughter fest featuring Art the Clown being Art the Clown, doing clowny things, which is cool. But it doesn't give it, a higher spot. And don't get me wrong, I love Art the Clown. I'm so thankful that this movie was made so that we could get Terrifier 2 and 3. This was a great project to get the ball rolling. Y'all are going to hate me for this one, but coming in at number 23 is the original Saw. I respect what this movie is, what it did for the horror genre, because it did. It really, in a down, when horror was kind of having this downswing in a time where there wasn't really anything interesting happening in the horror genre, This movie completely changed the game, came in and started an entire new subgenre of just outrageously graphic horror. I respect that. That being said, it's so boring. Coming in at number 22. And you can call it many things. You can call it Saw 7. You can call it Saw 3D. You can call it Saw the Final Chapter. Why does this movie have so many titles? Yet again, another movie that in the Saw franchise that has the outside story with the guy that's not interesting, and then the story inside the trap is pretty cool. You got a guy that pretended and wrote books about being a survivor. So the new Jigsaw decided, I'll let you be a new survivor. And so we have Saw 7. And it's awesome because you get Chester from Linkin Park in here. That whole scene was actually really good. But everything dealing with what's his face, I couldn't care enough to remember what the villain's name is. I do enjoy this movie. I wish that when they were that they would have just left Jigsaw alive. The movies would have probably turned out way better if we just had these same traps, but with Jigsaw actually running. Coming in at number 21 is another James Wan movie, and that is Malignant. This movie was pretty interesting. I will say the more and more that I watch James Wan's movies, the less and less I like his style of movies because they tend to have just these long, boring parts to them. But my favorite Fast and Furious movie will always be Tokyo Drift, and he did that one. Maybe he should just make car movies. I don't know. No, I'm just playing. I know that he is completely and almost single-handedly changed the game for the horror genre in many ways. I understand this. I love the Conjuring movies. I love Insidious. But man, like, Malignant is such a cool concept too, and has some really awesome parts to it when the entity has taken over and is like killing people, and you get to see like these really cool action scenes. But man, does this movie have parts that just drag and drag. But it's still an interesting concept with really cool action sequences, like awesome action sequences, that I wish there was more of that. This definitely could have been much better, but it's still a pretty decent overall movie. Coming in at number 20 is Spiral. I really, really just like the look of the traps in this. I like that instead of having somebody, taking the moniker of Jigsaw and being Jigsaw, they kind of did their own thing. And with their own little puppet and all of that. I love all of that. I love Samuel L. Jackson in this movie. I do believe that the weakest part is unfortunately the main character with Chris Rock. I don't think that he's as bad as some people say. But there are moments where his acting just comes across as trying too hard. But overall, this is actually a really fun movie. For me, at least. Coming in at number 19 is Sinister 2. This was the first Sinister movie that I actually saw. My girlfriend took me to see it in theaters because she loved the first Sinister movie. And when this one came out, she's like, "You're going to go see it with me?" I was like, "Okay, let's go. I really don't know what this movie's about. Let's go." And this is before my awakening into uh, being such a huge fan of the genre and now understanding just how awesome this genre really is, because it defies the standards of the rest of the movie world. But Sinister 2, I just have the reason it's this high, and on rewatch, you know, it's it's not as good, but because I saw this one first, it kind of, and this is one of those first movies, like of course I'd watched horror before, but when this is one of those first movies that I sat down and watched and was just like, holy crap. The concept behind this is just so awesome. I loved every moment of the movie when I first saw it in theaters. And then I started watching more and more horror pretty much after this moment, after watching Sinister 2. I think that's a weird movie to kind of get that click of what else can the horror genre do that no other genre does. And yeah, I really have a soft spot for this movie. On rewatch, it's really not as good as I remember, but just the concept of the Sinister franchise is so cool. Coming in at number 18, It Follows. Yet another movie that on rewatch is kind of slow, but the concept is so awesome. And I'm really, really excited to see the sequel to this. But just having basically an STD killer entity after you is is just such a wild concept in and of itself. But there's so many just terrifying moments in this movie, and just the thought of it can take it can take the shape of anybody, and all it's doing is walking towards me, and it's so menacing. It and just, I mean, there are, survival against this thing is a lot better than a lot of other horror, uh, you know, entities, but it's still so ominous and just absolutely terrifying to think about. Coming in at number 17 is Jigsaw. I know a lot of people just really think that this movie's not, the greatest. I really enjoy the traps in this one, and I know one of them is a reused trap. The first one is a reused trap from five, I believe. It's very similar, not exactly the same, but it is very similar. And just the characters in this one, having another killer that is taking the Jigsaw moniker, kind of, but at the same time, they're a little more interesting of a character. And then just how the movie ends, how you have the back and forth between the past and the present and what's going on when is kind of difficult to figure out for a little bit until and then once it finally clicks, you're like, oh, okay. Coming in at number 16 is Saw 4. This movie I just really enjoy because it's coming from a perspective of, I noticed that I really like, like in 6, you have the guy that's having to choose who lives and dies. And then in Spiral, you have, a guy who's being shown uh, who the villains are and get them to trying to get that character to see his side of things, and where it's kind of focused on this one guy instead of a group. And then in 7, you have the one guy, he's having to try to save everybody. Well, in this one, in 4, you have one guy and he's supposed to just not save them. His test is to not save anybody. That's his test. And I really enjoyed that side of it. And this cop that has this desire to save everyone, and Jigsaw's telling him, don't save anyone. And I really enjoy that concept. And then we get introduced to a new Jigsaw. Now, I know that a lot of people, because of 5 and 6 and 7, that makes them automatically dislike 4 because they already know who the new Jigsaw is going to become, what they do to the franchise. But my argument is you didn't know when he's revealed in the end of 4, and that left a lot of promise for the future, and 4 is just a really good Jigsaw movie. Or 4 is just a really good Saw movie. The added bonus of getting to know who the new Jigsaw is before you know what they become. There was promise in this movie. Coming in at number 15 is The Babadook. This is a very well-made movie. I love all the storybook elements to it. I love that it is trying to show the difficulty of, being a single parent trying to raise a child with special needs, the stress that can build up from that. Conceptually, this movie is awesome. But this movie is not made for me. I do not have a mind that can sit and be bored for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I'm not sure what the runtime of this movie is. I understand why people absolutely love this movie. And I would never begrudge anybody for having this as one of their favorite movies of all time. Like, I understand what it is. It's just my little need stuff happen now brain. Just, oh man, it's tough for me. But there are moments in this movie that are just phenomenal. Coming in at number 14 is Sinister. So this movie is another slow build. Just conceptually is just amazing. And I hate the fact that we only got 2 of these, but at the same time, having the second one kind of showed the problems that can occur, because really having a slow burn franchise is kind of difficult. You've got Conjuring, you've got Insidious. These are difficult things to master, and I have arguments for why at least Insidious, in my opinion, which I find to be better than the Conjuring universe, can still maintain a level of interest, whereas the Conjuring universe is failing to do so. And it's because having a slow burn franchise is so repetitive. And when you have, a slasher franchise, yes, it's repetitive, but it's fun and things are happening. Need stuff happen now, brain. I actually am glad that they made 2, because that gave me that unlock for my brain. 1 could have just, if they would have just made the first one, it actually would have been really great. Coming in at number 13 is It Part 2. This was almost really good. On rewatch of it, I actually enjoyed it more. I think when I went to see it in theaters, for my first watch of it, I was so disappointed that it didn't live up to the hype that the part 1 gave to the franchise. But with part 2, it's such a good cast. It didn't hold the same charm that the first movie did. It's still a really good movie. Still a good movie. It's still, in Pennywise's performance, forgive me, I'm terrible with names. Bill Skarsgård. There you go. Coming in at number 12 is Orphan First Kill. This was such a shocking prequel. I was not expecting it to be this good. With the actress having aged, but they pulled it off. This movie was really good, and it made Esther a much more known entity into kind of pop culture. And there were a lot of people that had never seen the original Orphan movie before this movie came out, and it just kind of pushed the franchise into the forefront of people's minds. And apparently they're making a third one, so we'll see. I hope that it's just as good. Coming in at number 11 is Orphan. Again, kind of the same thing. I had a hard time at which Orphan movie I would put in which place, but this one's just so good. Esther does such a great job playing this murderous little kid that it's just fantastic. Coming in at number 10, getting into our top 10 now, and we have Megan. Megan did such a great job at becoming like this pop culture icon, and people doing the dance, and just you saw Megan all over TikTok, all over YouTube, which I thought was fantastic. And what we need in the horror genre is more PG-13 horror to get kids addicted to the horror genre, so that we get more horror. I would say that horror movies is a pretty good vice. But with Megan, I actually really enjoyed this movie. My daughter loved the movie. It got her watching other horror movies. Coming in at number 9 is Maxxxine. This is tough because it's such a good movie, but at the same time, I was so disappointed with this movie. It just didn't give me the same rush of enjoyment that the other two did. But at the same time, it's such a damn good movie. The ending is weird, and I would almost have rather it been like the actual serial killer that the news was talking about and stuff at the time. Was it Richard Ramirez, Robert Ramirez, something? The name's not coming to me now, but yeah, it was Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. But if it would have been him as the main villain, I think that would have been better. I don't know, but still, such a great movie, such a great trilogy. If you have not seen the X trilogy, definitely check it out. Coming in at number 8 is Saw X. And this movie, the 10th Saw movie, just is such a good movie. You don't even have, like, I forgot I was watching a Saw movie. I just got so into him, like, just, living his life, dealing with this cancer, going to another country for treatment. And then all of a sudden it snaps you back into reality, like, oh yeah, we're in a Saw film. This is the ultimate Saw film. This is the one. Coming in at number 7 is Thanksgiving. Eli Roth knocked it out of the park with this movie. What a great new slasher to establish. And now we're definitely getting Thanksgiving 2 next year. The only complaint I have with this movie is, unfortunately, the young main cast. And I don't know if it was them or the dialogue written for them. I'm not sure which it was. So, because the dialogues for their characters isn't great. So, maybe In the next one, we'll get some better dialogue, some better characterization for the main cast. But the killer is fantastic, and all of the adults in the movie are amazing. One of my absolute favorite actors, Rick Hoffman, is in this movie. He plays Lewis Litt in Suits, which is one of my favorite characters in any film. um, and I wish he would have gotten more screen time, but alas, he did not. Maybe Rick Hoffman will be in 2. I haven't even looked to see if there's a cast for Thanksgiving 2 or not, but that would be awesome. Coming in at number 6 is It Part 1. The best version of Pennywise. The young cast in this movie is phenomenal. All of the scares and all of the, like, them going into the spooky house, like just every part of this movie is so good. You know, him feeding off of their nightmares, and it's like when it's children, and I think that might be the reason that part 2 didn't do so as good for me, because he's scaring children with their greatest fears, or just fears in general that they have, and it's so much more effective than what part 2 was doing when there were adults, and that might be what it is. I think that's the main issue. Coming in at number 5 is Terrifier 3. What a gruesomely, disgustingly beautiful movie. It wasn't beautiful at all, but it was just psycho nuts, crazy, off the wall goodness. It was just, here's some crazy crap, enjoy. And I did enjoy. And yeah, I can't wait for Terrifier 4. Um, Terrifier 3, you know, they took liberty with showing more than most films would be comfortable showing. Coming in at number 4 is Trick or Treat. And Sam is definitely a horror icon. You cannot go into a Spencer's or an FYE or a Hot Topic or anything where goth kids exist and not see Sam. And it's one of the best anthology horror movies ever made. Hands down. I love every part of it. I love the serial killer part where he's teaching his kid how to carve a pumpkin. I love the werewolf parts, or I love the werewolf part. Even though I just want to go suke. That's some True Blood reference for you. Um, I love, the ghost kids part. That's such a good part, but just the aesthetic uh, of the movie is absolutely perfection. You can't go wrong with Trick or Treat. And now for the top 3. Coming in at number 3 is X. X came kind of out of nowhere. I was like, oh, A24 slasher film? Interesting. Then read a little description. Okay, they're making a porno on a Texas farm. I was like, oh, it was a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay. Interesting. I'll check it out. Holy crap. Was I shocked. I was blown away by this movie. It was my number 1 movie for the year at the time. I was like, done. Nothing is going to beat this. And um, uh, I was shocked. Just completely shocked. The old lady just murking people off brutally. just taking people out. Was so good. So, so good. Coming in at number 2 is Terrifier 2. Man, 2022 went hard, bro. I absolutely love Terrifier 2. I love all the I love the aesthetic of it, all the props. I think that it showcases art at his very best. Gory, it's funny, it's just off the walls, ridiculous. And I loved every long ass minute of it. It was very long. It should have been a little bit shorter. Still. It's still my favorite Terrifier movie. And if you've been paying attention, you'll know what my number 1 is. Because it's part of a franchise that I've already been talking about. And there's one movie yet that I haven't said. And that is Pearl. I absolutely love Pearl. It is probably in my top 5 horror movies ever made. I love the look into this woman's life as she just descends into a psychotic break and just shows who she really is on the inside. And then I'm a sucker for a well-written monologue. And that monologue at the end, plus the chase scene right after that unfolds, is one of my favorite things in cinema. You can take that to the bank. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It would really help me out. If you don't want to, totally understand. Anyway, y'all have a good night, and I'll see you next time.